The bank's hold music was a piano arrangement of something I did not recognize, and I sat at my kitchen table listening to it, with the new card in front of me, and Leonard's old notepad, the one with the spiral binding, and the green lines open to a fresh page. It was a Tuesday in late November. The furnace had just clicked on somewhere below me, and I could feel it working. That faint vibration through the kitchen floor that has been this house's particular sound for 22 years. Outside the back window, the neighbor's chimney was putting up wood smoke, pale against the low Ohio sky. And the yard was that particular late autumn gray, where everything has gone flat, and the color has quit for the season. I had not told anyone I was making this call. The hold music played. I held the pen over the notepad and waited. On the table beside the notepad was a cup of tea I had made before picking up the phone, and it had gone from hot to warm while I was on hold. And I wrapped both hands around the mug and felt the warmth in my palms and breathed in through my nose and out through my mouth the way I have been doing since Leonard died, whenever I need to get something done that costs something to do. The representative came on the line. Her name was Diane. She was patient and clear, and she walked me through everything step by step, and I wrote the confirmation number on the green line notepad in large, careful letters, the way I have always written things I need to remember. The pension transfer was completed at 9:47 in the morning. I activated the new card 2 minutes later. I wrote down that number too. Then I put the pen down, and I picked up the card, and I held it in both hands for a moment, looking at it. A plain piece of plastic, nothing remarkable about it. My name embossed on the front with the kind of raised lettering that has always felt slightly formal to me, more formal than the thing itself warrants. But that morning, I held it the way you hold something that matters. Because it did. I put the card in the inside pocket of my coat, which was hanging on the chair beside me. I did not know yet that 6 hours later, my phone would ring. I did not know yet that the call would come from my daughter, Carolyn, and that her voice would have that particular quality of being managed from inside, and that I would understand in the first 30 seconds of that call exactly why she was calling and exactly what it confirmed. But I was ready for it. That is what I want you to understand from the beginning. By 9:47 on that Tuesday morning, I was already ready. This is the story of how I got there. And if you want to hear all of it, stay with me. Because it matters. I want to tell you who I am before I tell you what happened, because the story does not make full sense without knowing the person living it. My name is Ruth. I am 67 years old. I was born in a small town in eastern Ohio, and I have lived in this state my entire life, in 3 different towns. And for the last 22 years in this house, on a street of houses much like it, brick fronts and modest yards, and the particular dignity of working neighborhoods that do not make a production of themselves. I worked for the United States Postal Service for 35 years. I started as a distribution clerk, and I retired as a senior processing supervisor, and I am not going to pretend that was a glamorous career, because it was not. It was early mornings, and fluorescent light, and the smell of paper and ink and rubber bands, and conveyor belts and sorting machines, and the specific mental discipline of processing large quantities of information quickly and accurately. You learned to read things fast. You learned to notice inconsistencies. You learned, most importantly, to trust the particular physical sense of when something does not weigh right. A piece of mail that is heavier than its size suggests, or lighter, or oddly balanced, tells you something before you have opened it. 35 years of that. And you carry the skill into the rest of your life, whether you mean to or not. I was married to Leonard for 38 years. He died 2 winters ago of a stroke, quick and total, here in this house on a Sunday afternoon in February, when I was 40 feet away in the kitchen and did not know until I went to call him for dinner, and found him in the armchair with his hands in his lap. That is a thing I will not describe in detail, because some things do not need describing. What I want you to know about Leonard is that he was a steady man. He worked in water treatment for 32 years. He liked quiet evenings and well-made tools and keeping accurate records. We were not extravagant people. We saved routinely and spent carefully. And by the time we were both retired, the house was paid off, and we had a good cushion across several accounts, and my pension income was enough to cover living expenses with some left over. We talked about going to Scotland someday. Leonard had wanted to see where his grandmother came from. We had not gone yet when he died. I have a daughter. Carolyn is 43. She is Brian's wife. She grew up in this house and she left for college and came back only for holidays for many years, which is normal and which I did not resent, because children are supposed to move out and make their lives, and I had a clear enough life of my own not to require her presence to feel complete. She is not a bad person. I want to say that clearly even now. She is not a bad person. She made a series of choices involving her husband's judgment that turned out to be very costly, and the story of how I handled those choices is what I am here to tell you. Brian has worked in banking for most of his adult life. He is 46. He was in compliance for a major regional bank for 12 years, and he would tell you about this in detail if you gave him any opening. He knows, or says he knows, a great deal about financial structures and account types and legal instruments. He uses this knowledge in conversation the way some people use a good watch, as a signal about who he is and what he is worth taking seriously. They moved back to this county about 14 months ago. Carolyn said Brian had taken a new position nearby. She said she was glad to be closer. She brought a casserole on my first birthday after Leonard died, and she sat with me in the living room, and she talked about how she wanted to be there for me now that I was on my own. I was glad too. That is the honest truth. I was glad, and I told her so, and for a while I had reason to be. The question started in October, about 3 weeks before I called Diane at the bank and transferred the pension. They started at Sunday dinners. Carolyn and Brian had gotten into the habit of Sunday dinners, which was something I encouraged, because I like to cook, and I like the feeling of a full table and the winter coming on. And Leonard's absence is loudest in the evenings, so having people in the house on Sunday evenings was, for a while, genuinely good. Brian would help himself to more wine and lean back in his chair and start asking questions in a way that sounded like idle curiosity, but was not. What bank did I use? Whether it was a regional bank or a national one? Whether I had a financial advisor or managed things on my own? Whether the pension payments deposited directly or if I received a paper check? I answered. I did not see the point in not answering. These were ordinary questions that a person might ask a 67-year-old widow who was managing her own finances alone for the first time. They were the kinds of questions a concerned son-in-law might reasonably ask. But I am a woman who spent 35 years noticing when weight was wrong. And these questions had weight, not in any one question. Any single one of them would have been unremarkable. It was the accumulation of them. The way they came back, week after week, slightly repositioned, slightly deeper. Whether I had thought about consolidating my accounts for easier management. Whether someone I trusted had access to my accounts in case of an emergency. Whether I had updated my beneficiary designation since Leonard died. That last one arrived in the third Sunday, like something placed rather than dropped. Beneficiary designations. I said, yes, I had handled those. Thank you for thinking of it. He said, it's just, a lot of people in your situation don't realize how important that is. I said, I understand. I spent 35 years watching the results of what happens when people don't stay on top of paperwork. He laughed. He seemed to think I was agreeing with him. I was not agreeing with him. I was noting the phrase, your situation, and what it assumed. I was noting the specific direction the questions had been moving for 3 weeks, and I was beginning to understand that the Sunday dinners had a purpose that was not the same as the purpose I had imagined when I set the extra places at the table. I said nothing to Carolyn, not yet, because I have found, in my 67 years on Earth and 35 at the post office, that naming a thing too early is a mistake. You wait until you have the full envelope in your hand. Carolyn started calling every day. Before October, it had been once or twice a week, sometimes less, which is a normal frequency for a grown daughter with her own life. Then it became every day, then twice. The calls were warm. They were full of the right questions. How was I sleeping? Had I been out to walk? Had I seen Dr. Vickers for my annual checkup? Was I eating properly? Did I need anything from the store? The calls sounded to a person who was not paying close attention, like a daughter who had decided to take better care of her mother. I was paying very close attention. There is a kind of warmth that costs nothing and is spent freely. And there is a kind of warmth that is being deployed towards some specific end. And they feel different in the body when you are on the receiving end of them. They sound almost identical, but one has a slight quality of being managed, a subtle evenness that seems to keep itself from varying, a consistency that feels deliberate rather than natural. I know what natural warmth sounds like. Leonard was naturally warm. When Leonard asked how I was sleeping, it had a different texture than what Carolyn's daily calls were starting to have. I answered her warmly. I told her about my walks and my doctor's appointment and what I had been cooking. I did not tell her what I was noticing. At the post office, we had a phrase for pieces of mail that required more careful handling without drawing attention to the fact that they were being more carefully handled. We called it quiet processing. You did everything the same. You just did it with more attention than usual. I was quietly processing my daughter. Brian came to the house on a Wednesday afternoon, the second week of November, without Carolyn. He called an hour ahead to say he was in the area and wondered if he could stop by with something to share. I said, of course. I made coffee. I put out the shortbread tin that Leonard always liked. Still buy it out of habit. Probably always will. He came in and sat at the kitchen table. He was wearing a sport coat, which he always wears even casually, and he had a folder with him, the kind with a clasp. He set it on the table and he said, Ruth, I have been thinking about your situation, and I have put together something I think you should take a look at. He opened the folder. Inside were several pages, printed and organized with tabs. He explained it. He called it a family financial management structure. He said it was something a lot of families set up when there was a senior member managing accounts on their own to ensure continuity and protection. He said it would essentially pool certain assets into a trust structure overseen jointly, which in practice would mean that he and Carolyn would have management access to the relevant accounts. He used a lot of words. He is a man who uses many words when fewer would serve. I looked at the pages as he talked, and on the third page, in a section of smaller print that he had not drawn my attention to, I saw my pension account number, not a placeholder, not a dotted line waiting for information. My actual account number, the specific 12-digit number I had not given anyone, printed there in that document that had apparently been prepared before anyone had asked me anything. I looked at that number for what felt like a long time. It was probably 3 seconds. I said, "Thank you, Brian. This is thorough. I'll need to read through it carefully before I can say anything meaningful." He said, "Of course. Take your time. I can walk you through the parts that are a bit technical." I said, "I'll let you know if I have questions." He said, "I really think this is the right move for someone in your position, Ruth. With Leonard gone, you need people in your corner." I said, "You are right that I need people in my corner." I walked him to the door. I shook his hand. I watched his car pull out of the driveway with that familiar turn signal before the corner that I have seen 100 cars make from this front window. Then I went to the kitchen and I stood at the counter and I picked up my phone and I called the bank. The senior advisor at the bank was a man named Paul. He was calm and careful with his words, which I appreciated. I told him about the document. I told him the account number had appeared in a third-party financial trust document that had been prepared without my knowledge or consent. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Mrs. Kowalski, what you are describing is a serious concern. The appearance of an account number in a document you did not authorize is a significant red flag. I would strongly suggest we take steps to protect this account and any others you hold with us." I said, "That is why I am calling." He walked me through the options. I could add a security phrase required for any account inquiries. I could set up alerts for any access attempts or unusual activity, and I could transfer the pension deposits to a new account, one that would be entirely separate and entirely unknown to anyone outside the bank. I said I would like to do all three, starting with the transfer. He said, "We can begin that process today, but the actual transfer and new account setup will take a few business days. I can schedule it now." I said, "Schedule it." He also said gently but clearly that I might want to speak with an attorney about what I had seen, and that there were elder law specialists in the county who handled exactly this type of situation. I wrote down the name he gave me. That evening, after dinner, I called Frances Sherman. She is an attorney who specializes in elder financial law, and she has an office 12 minutes from my house. She answered her own phone, which surprised me pleasantly. I told her what I had seen. She asked several very specific questions. She said, "You did the right thing calling." She said, "Come in tomorrow morning, and we will talk through what you have and what your options are." I went in the next morning. We talked for 2 hours. I left with a clear picture of what Brian's document constituted legally and what protections I was entitled to. I did not tell Carolyn any of this. I went home and I cooked dinner and I watched an hour of television and I went to bed and I slept better than I had slept in 3 weeks. because the knowing, even of a hard thing, is a better companion than the uncertainty. The week and a half between the meeting with Francis in the morning I called Diane was what I would describe, if I were sorting it into a category, as the holding period. I had done what needed to be done. The process was in motion. The bank had the security phrase. The new account was being set up. Francis had the documentation. All that remained was to wait for Tuesday morning and make the official transfer call. Meanwhile, I had to continue to be exactly who I appeared to be to Carolyn and Brian. Brian called once, just a quick follow-up, he said, to see if I had any questions about the documents he had left. I said I was still reading through them. It was a lot to take in. He said, "Take all the time you need, no pressure." He said it the way people say something when they mean the opposite. I said, "I appreciate that, Brian." Carolyn called twice a day as usual. On Thursday evening, she mentioned that Brian had set up account monitoring for me as a safety measure so he could catch any suspicious activity. She said it made her feel better to know someone with his level of expertise was keeping an eye on things. She said it the way you say something when you expect it to land as reassurance. I said, "That was thoughtful." I said it completely evenly. I have been trained by life to say things evenly when everything in me is doing something else. What I was doing, on the inside, was noting the detail, account monitoring, without my knowledge or consent, arranged apparently sometime before this conversation, which explained how the account number had appeared in the document Brian had prepared, which explained the direction and accumulation of the Sunday question sessions, which completed the picture I had been assembling for 3 weeks. After Carolyn hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a few minutes without doing anything. The furnace clicked on. The wood smoke smell was coming in from somewhere outside. The kitchen was exactly as it has always been. The yellow walls I painted with Leonard 12 years ago. The window that is 2 inches warped in its frame and rattles if the wind is right. The clock on the wall that gains 90 seconds every month and that I reset faithfully rather than replace. I thought about the fact that my daughter and her husband had set up financial surveillance on my accounts without asking me. I thought about my account number in Brian's document. I thought about the phrase "your situation" and all the assumptions inside it. And then I thought, Tuesday morning, 9 o'clock, Diane at the bank, confirmation number, new card, coat pocket. I got up. I made a cup of chamomile tea. I took it to bed with me. I slept without difficulty. At the post office, we had a concept we called processing completion. It meant you have done what can be done at this stage. The next stage begins on schedule. What you do in the interval is not grip the mail, it is set it down and wait for the right bin to come around. I had set it down. The bin would come around on Tuesday. The morning of the transfer was a Tuesday, the 21st of November, and the sky over Ohio was the color of old dishwater, and the temperature was 31 degrees. I know this because I checked my outdoor thermometer before I made coffee, which is something I have done every morning for 22 years, and because this morning had a sharpness I wanted to notice correctly. I made the coffee first. It is a drip machine, nothing special, the same model I have used for 15 years, and it makes coffee that is exactly strong enough and nothing more. Leonard used to say it was the most dependable appliance in the house. I agree with this assessment. I poured a cup, I stood at the counter and drank half of it. Then I sat at the kitchen table, which is a round oak table that Leonard picked out in 1998 and has never wobbled once. I opened the green line notepad. I picked up a pen. I put my reading glasses on. I called the bank at 9 o'clock. The recording said my wait time was approximately 2 minutes. The hold music was a piano arrangement of something I could not name. I wrapped both hands around the mug and looked out the back window at the neighbor's chimney, putting up wood smoke against the gray sky. And I breathed steadily, and I waited. Diane came on the line. She confirmed my identity with the security phrase I had set up the week before, the make and model of a car Leonard had driven for 11 years, and that only I would know the name of. She confirmed my identity a second way. Then she confirmed the transfer request. She walked me through it step by step. The pension deposits would redirect to the new account beginning with the next payment cycle. The existing account would remain open but inactive for the pension. All existing security alerts were already in place. The new debit card had been mailed, but I also had the option to pick it up at the branch. I said, "I will pick it up today," she said. "I can note that on the account." "Would you like to go over the confirmation number for our records?" I said yes. She read it. I wrote it down in large, careful letters on the green line notepad. 9:47 in the morning. I drove to the branch after lunch. The branch manager who handled the card pickup was a woman named Sandra, who shook my hand and said she understood what I had been working through with the senior advisor team, and that they were glad I had reached out. She handed me the card in a plain white envelope. She said, "You are all set," and the way she said it had a quality of meaning more than the words alone. I thanked her. I put the envelope in my coat pocket without opening it there at the counter. I drove home. I sat at the kitchen table. I opened the envelope. I held the card. I put it in the inside pocket of my coat. I made myself a second cup of coffee, which I almost never do in the afternoon. I sat with it and I let the relief of having done the thing wash over me for a few minutes. Just a few. Then I tidied the kitchen and I waited for the afternoon. The phone rang at 4:08. I was standing at the kitchen counter cutting up carrots for dinner, which is a meditative task I have always liked. And the carrots were making that particular sound on the cutting board, that clean, repeated knock. And the furnace had come on again, and the kitchen was warm. And when the phone rang, the first ring was startling. And then I looked at the screen and saw Carolyn and I stopped cutting. And I breathed. I picked up. Carolyn said, "Mom." Her voice was gentle, managed gentle. I knew it in the first syllable. She said, "How are you? Are you home?" I said I was. She said, "So Brian was looking at your account monitoring today, and he noticed something unusual. He wanted to flag it right away because he knows how these things can go if you don't catch them early. It looks like there was a pretty significant transfer out of your main account this morning, and he just wants to make sure everything is okay, that no one has gotten into your account." I stood at the counter in my kitchen. I looked at the carrots on the cutting board. The furnace was running. The wood smoke smell was coming in faintly through the gap in the back door frame. I said, "Carolyn." She said, "Yes?" I said, "I appreciate you calling." She said, "Of course, Mom. We just want to make sure you're okay." I said, "I want to ask you something. What account was Brian monitoring?" There was a pause. "Briefly," she said, "your main account, the one the pension goes into." I said, "And he noticed a transfer from that account this morning?" She said, "Yes, and it's a large one, which is what concerns him. It might be nothing, but with fraud being what it is these days, we just thought you should know." I said, "I see," she said. "Is everything all right?" I said, "Everything is exactly right. Let me ask you something else." She waited. I said, "Carolyn, did Brian set up account monitoring on my accounts without asking me first?" The silence that followed was different from the brief pause before. This one had a texture to it, a weight. It lasted 4 full seconds. I counted. She said, "He mentioned he was going to do that as a precaution, since you are on your own now." I said, "He mentioned he was going to do it." She said, "Yes," I said. "And he did not ask me before he did it." Another silence. She said, "Mom, he was just trying to help." I said, "I know that is what you are saying." I heard the distinction land. I heard her breath change slightly. I said, "I want you to know something. I want you to know that I have been paying attention to this situation for 3 weeks. I spoke to my attorney yesterday. I spoke to the bank last week and again this morning. The transfer you are calling about is one I made myself this morning with full knowledge and intent. And I want you to know that Francis Sherman has a letter prepared and ready to send, and that the bank has a formal record of everything I have described to them over the past 10 days. She said nothing. I said, "I need you to understand that I am not confused about what is happening. I have not been confused about it since I was sitting across from Brian at this table, and I saw my pension account number on the 3rd page of a document I had not authorized." She made a sound then, a soft, involuntary sound, not a word. I said, "I would like you to hear what I just said and sit with it for a while." Then I said, "I need to finish making dinner. I will call you in a few days," and I hung up. I stood at the counter. I picked up the knife. I went back to the carrots. The cutting board made its clean, repeated sounds. The kitchen was warm. The clock on the wall was gaining its 90 seconds. I finished the carrots. I cooked the dinner. I ate it at the kitchen table in the November dark. And then I washed the dishes and I dried them and I put them away, which is the most normalizing act I know. And that was the evening. Carolyn called the next morning. I let it ring through to voicemail. She called again that afternoon. The message she left was careful and measured, and it said she wanted to talk, that she understood she owed me an explanation, and that she was sorry for not calling sooner. She sounded smaller than her usual phone voice. I noticed this without acting on it. I called Francis instead. Francis said the cease and desist letter had gone out to Brian that morning by certified mail. She explained what it said, that he was to immediately terminate any form of financial monitoring or access he had arranged, authorized or unauthorized, on any account held by Ruth Ann Kowalski, and that any further contact regarding my financial affairs should be directed to her office. She said she had not received any response yet. I said, I do not expect one. Brian is not the kind of man who responds to things the way human beings respond to them. He responds the way compliance officers respond, which is to assess exposure and say as little as possible. Francis said, that is probably accurate. She paused. She said, Ruth, you handled this very well. You came in with documentation, you had the timeline, you had the account number incident noted. That kind of preparation is what makes the difference in situations like this. I said, 35 years at the post office taught me that you do not process anything important without a paper trail. She laughed a little. She said, I am going to remember that. I called the bank afterward and spoke to Sandra again, just to confirm that the cease in unauthorized monitoring had been carried out on the technical side. She confirmed that the access Brian had set up, which had apparently been arranged through a third-party service that required only an account number and basic holder information to initialize, had been revoked and blocked. She also told me, carefully, that the kind of monitoring setup he had used was a known method, that she had seen it before in other situations, that the bank had clear protocols for it, and that I had done everything right. I thanked her. I meant it. Then I sat at the kitchen table with the green line notepad, and I made a list. Not of things I needed to do, of things that were done, the transfer, the new account, the security phrase, the alerts, Francis's letter, the bank revocation, these items, on a list, on green lines. I like lists because they are honest. They show you exactly where you are. They do not exaggerate or diminish. They are just the facts, arranged so you can see them. I looked at the list. I drew a line under it. I set the pad down. I was all right. The weeks after were not empty, exactly, but they had a different quality, a spaciousness. The daily calls from Carolyn stopped. The Sunday dinners stopped. Brian's presence, which I had grown so accustomed to watching with most of my attention, simply ceased. The house was just mine again, in a way it had been before they moved back to the county. I am honest enough to admit that a part of me grieved this, in a particular way. Not for Brian, whose company I had been tolerating at best, but for the version of Carolyn I had imagined was returning to me when they moved nearby. The daughter who brought a casserole on my birthday. The daughter who said she wanted to be there. I had let myself believe in that version more fully than I should have. I was sorting through that in the weeks after, trying to understand how much of it had been real and how much of it had been directed toward a purpose. I think some of it was real. I think Carolyn does love me, in the way that complicated people love, in complicated directions at the same time. I think she also got pulled along by her husband's certainty, which is a gravitational field that some people cannot distinguish from their own thinking. I think she told herself it was help. I think some of her believed it was. Understanding that did not make it better exactly, but it made it more accurate. And accuracy, I have found, is better than comforting yourself with a story that does not fit the facts. I went for walks in the November dark after dinner, which I had not done before, just around the neighborhood. 3 blocks, sometimes 4. The air was cold enough to see my breath, and the streetlights put down pools of yellow on the wet pavement, and the neighborhood was quiet in the way of neighborhoods in late autumn. Everyone inside, the muted light of television through curtains, the occasional dog walk. I thought while I walked, or I did not think. Sometimes I just walked. My neighbor Vivienne, who is 72 and walks her spaniel at roughly the same hour, fell into step with me one evening, and we walked 2 blocks together, talking about the winter coming on and the specific quality of cold air when it is not yet bitter, just firm. She mentioned that she had been attending a financial safety workshop at the county library on Thursday evenings. She said it was for older residents, Mostly women, mostly on their own. She said it was worth going if I ever had the time. I said I might. I thought about it for 2 days. Then I went. The county library is a building I have loved since I was 40, and we moved to this town, and I got my card within the first week. It smells of paper and heating vents, and the particular quiet of places where people come to be in the presence of accumulated information. On Thursday evenings in November, it is warm and well lit, and the parking lot is half full, and the automatic doors open with a small push of warm air. The financial safety workshop met in the community room at the back. 8 chairs arranged in a loose circle, a folding table with a coffee urn, and a box of shortbread. A woman named Gail at the front, who identified herself as a certified financial social worker, whatever that meant exactly, and said she had been running this group for 4 years. I expected to feel out of place. I did not. The women in that circle had versions of my story the way musical themes have variations. Different instruments, same melody. A sister who had started managing her mother's accounts after the mother's husband died. Then the accounts had started looking different. A son who had introduced a financial advisor who turned out to be the son's friend. A daughter-in-law who had suggested a joint account for convenience, and the convenience had moved only in one direction. I listened and I recognized. Not every detail, but the shape. The shape of someone testing the weight of a closed envelope before asking you to open it. I spoke after 40 minutes. I told the group about Brian's document, about my pension account number on the 3rd page, about the Sunday dinners and the daily calls and the way questions accumulate into a picture. I told them what I had done, step by step. The bank call, Francis, the transfer, the confirmation number on the green line notepad. 2 of the women wrote down the bank's main number. One of them wrote down Francis's name. When we were putting on our coats to leave, a woman named Margaret, who was maybe 73 and had a very precise way of doing everything, put her hand on my arm briefly, just her fingers, just for a second, and said, "You were ready. When it mattered, you were ready." I said, "I had a little practice." She said, "We all had practice. Not everyone uses it." I drove home from the library in the November dark, with the heater running and the familiar streets unspooling under the headlights, and I felt something I had not felt in some time, which was the specific warmth of being in the right place among the right people. Not family, as I had always defined it, but something that functioned as family functions on its best days, which is people who see you clearly and do not require you to be other than what you are. I want to tell you about the conversation with Carolyn in January, because it matters and because it does not have a simple ending, and I think you deserve to know that. She called on a Thursday evening, about 7 weeks after the night of the carrots and the 8 minutes past 4 phone call. It was the first call she had made in the intervening weeks, and it had a different quality from all the earlier ones. It was quieter. There was no management in it. She said, "Mom," and she waited. I said, "Carolyn." She said, "I have been trying to think of what to say for 7 weeks. I said, "What did you decide?" She said, "I decided to say I am sorry, that I am truly sorry, and that I do not expect you to accept that right now or maybe ever, but I needed to say it because not saying it was making me someone I did not want to be." I said, "I appreciate that." She said, "I knew something was wrong with what Brian was doing. I told myself it was helpful. I told myself I was being a good daughter, but I knew that was not the whole truth, and I let it be anyway." I was quiet for a moment. I said, "Carolyn, I want to say 2 things." She waited. I said, "The first thing is that I believe you when you say you are sorry. I believe this is real." She said, "Thank you." I said, "The second thing is that some things that happen between people shift the ground they are standing on, and the ground does not automatically shift back, just because both people would prefer it to. What happened between us has shifted some ground. I am going to take my time about what I decide to build on it." She said, "I know, I am not asking for anything right now." I said, "That is a good thing to not be asking for right now." We talked for a few more minutes about ordinary things, cautiously, like people walking back into a room they have recently rearranged. She said Brian had left the new position and was looking for work. She said she had started talking to a counselor about how she had let herself get pulled along. She did not say more than that, and I did not ask. We said goodnight. The call was 23 minutes, which was shorter than most of her calls in October, and longer than any conversation we had managed to have with genuine truth in it. I sat at the kitchen table after and thought about what I believe about love and damage, and the long work of deciding what to rebuild. I do not have a neat answer. I am working on it. I expect to be working on it for some time. What I know now from the other side of all of this is a set of things I could not have told you as clearly before November. I know that we earn the skill of noticing. I spent 35 years sorting mail in a fluorescent building, and the skill I carried out of it was the ability to feel wrong weight in a closed envelope before I had opened it. That skill is mine. No one took it from me when they retired me. No one takes it from you either. Whatever you have spent your life learning to do, you carry it with you into every room you enter, including the kitchen where someone is asking you innocent-sounding questions at Sunday dinner. I know that the first protective action is always the hardest and almost always the right one. That Wednesday afternoon when Brian left and I walked to the counter and picked up my phone, the part of me that had been making excuses for 3 weeks was still arguing. It still said, maybe you misread it. Maybe the account number was there by mistake. Maybe he is genuinely trying to help. I made the call anyway. I talked to Paul at the bank anyway. I called Francis anyway. Every protective step I took came at a point when I was still not entirely certain, and still took the step, and every step turned out to be correct. I know that being alone is not the same as being without resources. I was alone in this house. Leonard was gone, but I had a bank, and I had Francis, and I had Vivian, who told me about a Thursday evening at the library, and I had 8 women in a circle of chairs who knew the exact weight of what I had been carrying. Resources do not always look like people who are already in your life. Sometimes they look like people you have not met yet. I know that money matters as much as you let yourself admit it does. I was raised not to talk about money, not to display concern about it, not to be the kind of person who made a fuss about financial things. That upbringing almost cost me everything Leonard and I spent 38 years building. Money is not everything, but it is the floor of a life. And I had every right to protect mine. You have every right to protect yours. I know that it is possible to love someone and to see them clearly at the same time. I love my daughter. I see what she was willing to do and what she was willing to let happen. Both of these are true. Holding both without resolving one into the other is uncomfortable. I am holding them anyway, because the alternative is a version of the story that is simpler but not accurate. And the last thing I know, the right moment to act is the moment you know enough, not the moment you know everything. You will never know everything. You wait until the wait is clear, and then you pick up the phone. It is late February now, and the winter is starting to loosen its grip in the small way that Ohio winters do, which is not dramatically but by degrees, a fraction of a degree each day, so you only notice it over a week's span. The snow that came in January is mostly gone. The yard is bare and brown, and the tree at the back fence is nothing but structure, all branch and no leaf. But the structure is still there, intact, and that is what February trees are for. I came home from the library Thursday evening last week and parked in the driveway and sat in the car for a moment before going inside. The neighborhood was quiet, the streetlights were on. The house was dark except for the porch light I always leave on, which threw a yellow circle on the front step and made the house look like what it is. Mine. Paid for. Belonging to me. The specific weight of that was pleasant to sit with. I went inside. I turned on the kitchen light. I hung my coat on the chair. I put the kettle on. The new debit card is in my wallet, which is in my purse, which is on the hook by the door where I have kept my purse for 22 years. The pension lands in the new account quietly on the first of every month, like it always has. Except now, it lands somewhere that belongs only to me, in a way that is certain, documented, protected, and complete. I made the chamomile tea. I sat at the kitchen table. The furnace clicked on in the basement, and I felt the warmth of it rising. The window rattled slightly in its warped frame, which it always does when the wind is from the north. The clock on the wall gained its 90 seconds, as it always does, and I made a mental note to reset it on Sunday. I thought about the 9:47 on the green line notepad, about Diane on the phone, who was patient and clear, about Sandra, who said you are all set in a way that meant more than it said, about Francis, whose letter was exact and final, about the 8 women in the circle of chairs, about Margaret, who put her hand on my arm for one precise moment and said, "You were ready. When it mattered, you were ready. I was. I am." And to anyone sitting at their own table right now, in their own quiet house, holding something they are not quite sure how to name, I want to say, the knowing you have already started doing is the beginning of the protecting. You do not have to be certain before you act. You just have to trust what you have spent your life learning to feel. Pick up the phone, call the bank, call the attorney, write the number down on a notepad, and put the card in your pocket. The weight will tell you when it is wrong. It always does. If this story reached you somewhere true, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell me, have you ever had to protect something you worked your whole life to build? What did it take? Your story matters. And the people in this community, the ones reading and watching and sitting with their own version of what I just told you, they need to hear it too. Like this, if it helped you feel less alone in it. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one, because there are more, and they belong to all of us. Share it with someone who needs it. A friend, a neighbor, a sister, someone who is sitting at a table right now, wondering whether what she is sensing is real. It is real. What you feel is real. Take care of your floor. Take care of what you built.